I've played tons of NES games, and from that library, I've played every single sports game. Chalk it up to an episode that I did way back when. It was actually one of my first requested videos, so in some ways, it's important to me. That being said, 8 months ago, Jason the God requested a video talking about alternative sports games, and you know me, if someone asks, I'll make the video. Now before I hop into this, I do want to establish what I consider an alternative sports game. When I think of sports games on the NES, I think of games that tried to follow the rules with realism. Alternative sports games I consider an enhancement to realism with some sort of literary license like science fiction, comic book characters, or just breaking the rules, right? I know that this is a gray area, and historically I've had shortcomings with identifying genres, so please be patient with me. Also, this is going to be one of those best of the worst situations. These games aren't exactly ones that I would show up to my friend's house bragging about, right? That being said, these are my top 10 best alternative sports games on the NES. Let's begin. You pushed that air you just launched out of your nostrils back in. This game isn't bad at all. It's just different. Alright? Little interesting point though, if you lived in Japan or owned a Famicom, you might recognize this game as Donald Duck, because it is. But when it was ported to the US in 1990, they swapped out the Disney stuff for Peanuts stuff. For those of you who don't know what Peanuts is, it was a comic strip written by Charles Schulz, and it contains characters such as Charlie Brown, Lucy, Peppermint Patty, Snoopy, Sally, Linus, Woodstock. It's a well-known comic. Granted, I've never read it. I was from the generation where it was a TV show, and in some cases, movies. In fact, I don't even know why the fuck it's called Peanuts, but hey, it is. This game sort of paralleled the whole Olympic sports nonsense that track and field damn near perfected. We have novelty minigames such as boot toss, sack race, river jump. There's 6 little events, right? It's not a bad game. The problem is the novelty of it wears off pretty quickly. Peanuts still maintains a media presence, especially in the video game world, with the most recent being Snoopy's Grand Adventure in 2015. This is a power pad game, which means my fat ass had to physically stand up to play this one. I was hoping maybe I could use a controller, but the power pad breaks out the NES controls more than I'm capable of emulating. Lucky for me, I have one of those fancy adapters for NES to USB, and I own a power pad. Super Team Games has a setting of summer camp, right? The games are stupid, like Belly Bump Ball or Watercross or Crab Walk. You know, these power pad games, they're pretty neat. It's interesting to work on a peripheral that doesn't involve my hands for once, but let me tell you, these games will make you work up a sweat, which is a good thing. The whole purpose of the power pad was to get people more active. A majority of the games were born from Bandai's family trainer line, so it kind of makes sense. It's playable, and playable is good, but I think I prefer sitting down in a comfy chair. I'm too old to be running around. This is a weird one, and in some ways there could be an argument that this isn't a sports game at all because it's more of a rhythm game, but the theme here is that it is boxing. Way back in 1987, Nintendo released Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! It was a critical success, and for many, it's a rite of passage game. I've played it, my kids have played it, my dad played it, everyone's played it. Beat it? Not so much, but we played it, or at least we know of it. Now this game, Power Punch 2, is the intended spiritual successor to Punch-Out! On the NES, but Mike Tyson in the 90s, he was kind of an unhinged gremlin, right? This was where he was going through his sexual assault case, allegedly, right? There was a lot of negative publicity headed his way, and Nintendo hates negative publicity, so they disowned it. Beam Software didn't want to give up on the game, though, so they approached American Softworks and developed a game where we play as Mark Tough Guy Tyler, who apparently has destroyed every boxer on Earth and is now competing in the Intergalactic Boxing Federation. Yeah. This game isn't that great, after all it is a Beam Software game, but I do find some weird, stupid charm in it. It's Punch-Out! In space. It does what it's supposed to do. My big chief complaint though is that the enemies have insane health, so you really need to build solid strategies during the training sections to beat these opponents. I don't know if you can tell, but this was a rough list to generate, because these games aren't really something I would brag about playing. Rollerblade Racer is a prime example of that. Like 90% of high-tech Expressions published games I cannot physically stand. I'm just not big on what they put out. But Rollerblade Racer is fairly decent. Do you remember the skateboarding stuff from Back to the Future 1? It's like that, but instead it's better. We just kind of dodge obstacles, get points doing stunts. Our whole objective is just to get enough money to buy new roller skates. And guess what? Provided you don't eat shit or just ride on the sidewalk, you can win in 9 minutes. I shit you not. That's an actual strategy to beat this game. To be fair, High-Tech was known for their games aimed at children, and that was their undoing. There was literally no difficulty in their games. People didn't want them. I don't blame them either. Their approach in the Super Nintendo era wasn't enough to stand up against the edgier titles, and it kind of faded away. This is pretty neat. The game itself is dog shit, but what really pulled me into wanting to play it was the artwork and the animation, right? The animation in this is insane, and it pisses me off that this is the only NES game created by this company, Laura Ciel. I would have been interested to see what else they could have pulled off on the NES if given the chance. Now, some of you might say, "Hey, it's karate! Karate's a sport!" Yes, it is, but I see this more as a fighting game with sports elements, so I included it. Essentially, this is a kickboxing simulator. We go through training sessions, and when the actual game starts, we fight, and it's a good fight. I was actually kind of caught off guard. I didn't expect to see this on the NES. It almost reminds me of the animation that made Prince of Persia stand out, even though I hate Prince of Persia. I do like the idea of smooth animation. When you're so used to the jagged sprite work the NES was commonly known for, it is refreshing to me. If you have the time and the patience, give it a shake. There were tons of basketball games on the NES, and they all had their own little quirks, and it stemmed from an era where they wanted to figure out what would work. We watched as the ability to properly represent these sports evolved in front of our eyes. So you're going to have good attempts, and you're going to have bad attempts. Jordan vs. Bird is a 1v1 game of pickup. It's simple and to the point, and it features two of the greatest basketball players of their time. But it is lacking. Severely lacking. Larry Bird can't dunk. I don't know why, he just can't. And the animations are blocky. To me, this is better on the Atari home computer. And even when you do play it, if you do play it, the penalties can be considered asinine. There really isn't much logic. So if you want to play a different kind of basketball game, then just know that this exists. Probably move past it though. Roundball 2-on-2 Challenge is what happens when you take the formula that made Jordan vs. Bird popular, but you do it slightly better. Again, this isn't a game worth bragging about. The only reason it's here is because it's a departure from the usual basketball rules, namely with how many folks are on the court at the time. You have options for exhibition matches or a tournament. If you want to sit through the buffoonery for longer than you need, you can choose from 24 different athletes, and that's about it. The company that made this fucking imploded on itself soon after, and a majority of their employees went to work at a little new shithole company known as Sony ImageSoft. What a time to be alive. I was caught off guard with this one. When I see Camerica, I think of unlicensed jank bullshit because that's what like 80% of their library is. Unlicensed middle fingers to Nintendo, especially after winning a lawsuit with the game Genie. This is one of those middle fingers, Stunt Kids, a game that I can only describe as a better looking two-player Excitebike. At least that's how it's presented. Are you familiar with Trials? It's a sport where people are on motorcycles or ATVs, and their objective is to move over logs, make jumps, climb walls, and in some ways this is kind of the earliest iteration of it that I could find, at least from a video game perspective. Maybe you know more than I do, and if you do, feel free to comment down below. As you can see from the footage, we have our character on top and the CPU on the bottom. It would just kind of move to the right. It's very kiddish in how it's presented, but I didn't mind it. I actually had fun with it. Alright, deep breath. You can breathe fresh air. We've moved past the point of no return, and we're having a good time. At least I am. I can't express to you the bullshit I had to play to make this list, and I hope to never encounter half of these games ever again. But you put a zapper in my hand, all of my stress fades away. Shooting Range is a fun little novelty game where we can earn sports medals if we score well enough. While it plays the same for the most part, there are quite a few stages with different backdrops or settings, which you might think doesn't matter at all, but if you consider that many of the light gun games on the NES involve the same shit for as long as you can tolerate it, this is a nice departure. I should get this for my kids. I know Arya would love it. Kian might as well. And today I'm finishing our list off with Punch-Out, a derivative of boxing that presents itself as boxing, but in reality, at least to me, is a rhythm game, and I'll die on that hill. But irrelevant to the mass idea of it being a rhythm game, I do consider it an alternative sports game. Did you know that there are 3 different versions of this? Most people know about Mike Tyson's Punch-Out and the re-release that has Mr. Dream, but there was a gold cart released on the Famicom, and in some ways, it's a rare collector's item. The only way you could get it was to either win it in a raffle or win a high score contest for Famicom Golf on the Famicom Disk System, and it does play slightly different. Macho Man is the final boss, and the victory jingle, it's a little bit different. But the rest of the game, it's the same. We play as Little Mac going through the motions of punching the shit out of literally everyone in the hopes of winning that awesome championship belt. But be warned, no matter what version you play of this, the game will kick your ass. And if you're playing it on emulation, good luck. This is one of those games that you need to beat on true hardware, because those few frames actually matter. And that's it for today. I want to apologize because this video contains stuff that was really hard to talk about, games that aren't that great, but it's important to identify because they do exist. It was the darker side of sports games from the era, and we can't ignore it. What about you though? Which alternate sport games brought you joy as a kid? I'd love to know down below, and if you made it to the end of this episode, you're already home in our community. We're a group of video game enthusiasts that love remembering a time when life was just a little bit easier to live, and we're slowly working our way towards our next major milestone of 8,000 subscribers. I'd love to have you as part of my retro gaming journey, so feel free to hop along. Finally, the single most important thing you could do for me is to hit that thumbs up button, as it directly impacts the visibility of the videos and the projects that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes, Fortefyre out.